Today guys, we are diving into one of the most fascinating mysteries of ancient Egypt. A story of beauty, power, religious revolution, and a disappearance that has puzzled historians for centuries. The woman at the center of it all, but here's the thing, everything you think you know about her might be wrong. Was she just a beautiful queen standing beside her husband, or did she secretly rule Egypt under a different name? Did she vanish into history, or did she transform into something else entirely? And that famous bust we've all seen? The one that made her the face of ancient Egypt? It might not even have been meant for public display. Before we unravel this 3,000-year-old mystery, take a moment to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And tap the bell icon so you don't miss the conclusion. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this story ends. Also, drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing this community spread across the globe, whether it's midnight in New York, early morning in London, or evening in Los Angeles. Now dim the lights, get comfortable, and maybe grab a drink. We're about to step back in time to the golden sands of Amarna, where a queen's face launched 1,000 debates, and her secrets are still buried beneath the desert. Let's begin. In 1912, a German excavation team working in the ruins of Amarna uncovered something extraordinary. Dust, broken fragments, and half-finished works lay scattered across what appeared to be an ancient sculptor's studio. And then, sitting there as if waiting for her moment in history, they found her. Nefertiti. Perfectly sculpted, with high cheekbones sharp enough to cut papyrus, smooth skin, that long elegant neck, and the iconic blue crown rising like she already knew she would win history's beauty contest 3,000 years later. One eye was missing from the bust, which somehow made her even more famous. Imperfection, it seems, photographs better. The world was stunned when they first saw her. She didn't look ancient. She looked modern, like she could step off a runway in Milan and politely dethrone everyone else. And just like that, she became the face of ancient Egypt. But here is the part nobody puts on the souvenir mugs. That bust was probably not meant to be the final portrait. Most scholars believe it was a workshop model, essentially a sculptor's reference piece. Think of it as the ancient equivalent of a sample image pinned on a studio wall. The most recognizable queen in human history may have achieved global immortality because someone forgot to clean up their practice draft. That is not mythic destiny. That is excellent timing. Yet look closer at the craftsmanship. The symmetry, the pigment blending, the subtle curve of the lips. This was not a rushed assignment. Even as a model, it was executed with precision. Ancient Egyptian art was not casual decoration. It was propaganda carved in stone. Representation equaled importance. So if this was just the reference version, imagine how powerful the full royal imagery must have been. And then there is her expression. Calm, controlled, slightly detached. Not smiling, not frowning. It is the face of someone who knows more than you. That might be fitting because before we even touch the question of whether she ruled as king or vanished on purpose, we have to admit something. Nefertiti mastered image, or at the very least, someone around her understood the value of visual control. And if history is written in stone, she made sure her face would survive long enough to make us argue about her forever. Not bad for a practice piece. Now that we have admired the cheekbones long enough, let us talk about power. Nefertiti was the great royal wife of Pharaoh Akhenaten. If that sounds like a standard royal marriage, it was not. Akhenaten was not your average pharaoh. Most Egyptian rulers worked within a well-established system. Honor the gods, keep the priests happy, build temples, win wars, repeat. Akhenaten looked at that system and said politely but decisively, no. He elevated Aten, the sun disk, above all other gods. Not as part of the divine lineup, not as first among equals, but as the main event. Centuries of tradition were replaced. The powerful priesthood of Ammonius was politely sidelined. Temples closed or were repurposed. That is not religious reform. That is a theological earthquake. And Nefertiti was not standing behind him holding flowers. In reliefs from Amarna, she appears nearly equal in size to the king. In Egyptian art, size matters. The larger the figure, the greater the importance. She is not scaled down like a decorative spouse. She performs rituals. She makes offerings to Aten. In some scenes, she even smites enemies, a pose traditionally reserved for pharaohs. That raises an eyebrow. Queens were influential, yes, but they were not typically depicted acting like co-rulers in official state imagery. This was not symbolic fluff. This was messaging. Akhenaten and Nefertiti presented themselves as a divine partnership. Aten's rays extend toward both of them, ending in tiny hands that offer life symbols equally. That is not accidental. That is branding. If Akhenaten was restructuring religion to centralize power around himself, Nefertiti was clearly part of that consolidation. She was not ornamental. She was strategic. Some scholars even argue she may have served as co-regent later in his reign, effectively ruling alongside him. That makes the title Great Royal Wife feel incomplete. What we are seeing in these carvings does not look like a supportive spouse. It looks like shared authority. And that is where the mystery deepens. If she was already acting like a ruler while he lived, what happened when he did not? To understand Nefertiti's role, we need to understand just how radical this religious shift really was. Ancient Egypt did not casually change gods. They collected them. Over centuries, Egypt developed a sprawling pantheon. Ammonius, Ra, Osiris, Isis, Horus, Hathor. Divine departments for everything from fertility to the afterlife. Temples were economic powerhouses. Priests controlled wealth, land, and influence. Religion was not just spiritual. It was politica, political infrastructure. Then Akhenaten stepped in and essentially said, "We are simplifying." Aten, represented as the physical sun disk, became the supreme deity. Other gods were not necessarily declared non-existent, but they were pushed aside. Their temples closed. Their names removed from monuments. When you erase a god's name in ancient Egypt, that is not symbolic. That is aggressive. And Nefertiti stood right beside him during this transition. Art from the Amarna period shows something unusual. The royal family is depicted in intimate domestic scenes, kissing children, sitting together beneath Aten's rays. The sun's beams end in tiny hands offering the Ankh, the symbol of life. Those hands do not just reach Akhenaten. They reach Nefertiti too. This is subtle but powerful. It visually reinforces that divine favor flows through both of them. She is not just queen. She is part of the divine conduit. That is revolutionary imagery. Egyptian art was deeply formulaic for thousands of years. Suddenly, proportions change. Bodies are elongated. Faces narrow. Scenes feel almost personal. It is as if the entire visual language of Egypt shifted overnight. Nefertiti adapted flawlessly, or perhaps helped design it. This was not random artistic experimentation. It was ideological messaging. By centralizing worship around Aten and presenting themselves as the exclusive intermediaries between God and people, Akhenaten and Nefertiti tightened control. Less priesthood, more royal authority. If the king was the primary bridge to divinity, the queen stood right beside him on that bridge. Her power was not secondary. It was embedded in the theology itself. When religion and politics merge like that, removing one figure from the equation becomes very complicated, especially if that figure knows exactly how the system works. If you are going to overturn centuries of religion, sideline the most powerful priesthood in the country, and declare a near monotheistic devotion to the sun, you probably do not want to stay in the old capital. Too many reminders, too many critics, too many angry priests. So Akhenaten did what any confident revolutionary would do. He built an entirely new city from scratch. Akhetaten, horizon of the Aten. Today we call it Amarna. Fresh land, fresh temples, fresh start. No old gods watching from the walls. This was not just relocation. It was symbolic separation. A physical break from Thebes and the traditional centers of power. Nefertiti moved with him. In fact, she did not just move. She flourished there. The art from Amarna is unlike anything Egypt had produced before. Gone were the rigid eternal poses of earlier dynasties. Instead, we see the royal family in intimate, almost tender scenes. Akhenaten and Nefertiti sit together beneath Aten's rays, playing with their daughters. It feels almost human. In these depictions, Nefertiti is everywhere, nearly equal in size to the king, participating in rituals, offering to Aten independently. In some reliefs, she even drives a chariot. That is not background decoration. That is visibility. Amarna was not just a city. It was a stage. The royal couple were the central performers in a carefully constructed narrative. Divine, unified, chosen by the sun itself. If you are redesigning religion, architecture, and artistic style all at once, you are also redesigning how power is perceived. Nefertiti understood perception. Her presence in Amarna art is not passive. It is assertive, intentional, structured. She is not simply shown supporting the king. She mirrors him. In a society where symbolism equals authority, mirroring is not trivial. It is strategic. Amarna was supposed to represent a new order. Aten above all. The royal family as divine intermediaries. And Nefertiti at the very center of that structure. But revolutions are fragile. When a new system depends heavily on image and unity, what happens when one half of that image disappears? That is when the illusion begins to crack. By the time Amarna was in full swing, something subtle and slightly unsettling was happening in the art. Nefertiti was not just standing next to power. She was starting to look like it. In several reliefs, she wears the blue crown traditionally associated with royalty. She appears in poses that were once reserved strictly for pharaohs. In one striking image, she smites enemies. Arm raised, posture firm, body positioned exactly as kings had done for generations. That is not symbolism you hand out casually. In ancient Egypt, the act of smiting enemies was not just about military strength. It was a visual declaration of authority. It told the world, I rule. I protect Ma'at, the divine order. I am the one standing between chaos and civilization. Here was Nefertiti doing it confidently, without apology. That naturally raises a question. Was she being depicted as unusually powerful for a queen, or was she already functioning as something closer to co-ruler? Some scholars argue that in the later years of Akhenaten's reign, Nefertiti may have taken on the role of co-regent. This would mean she shared formal ruling authority, not just ceremonial presence. If true, that changes everything. Once you share the throne, you do not simply step back into the background. Around the later years of Akhenaten's rule, inscriptions mention a figure named Neferneferuaten. Sound familiar? Nefertiti's full name included Neferneferuaten. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe this was a transition. Egyptian pharaohs adopted throne names upon ascending to full kingship. If Nefertiti became co-ruler, or even sole ruler after Akhenaten's decline, she would have needed a royal name aligned with tradition. If she did take on such a role, she would also need to adjust how she was presented visually. Less queen, more king. That might explain why some depictions show a shift. A more masculine portrayal. A more formal presence. Ancient Egypt had precedent for this. Hatshepsut, centuries earlier, adopted male regalia when she ruled as pharaoh. It was not deception. It was protocol. Which brings us back to the central question. Did Nefertiti fool the world? Or did she simply understand that in order to rule, sometimes you must change the mask you wear? In Egypt, power was not just inherited. It was performed. and she may have been very good at performing it. After years of visibility, authority, and near equal representation beside the king, Nefertiti disappears. Not gradually. Not ceremonially. Just gone. Around year 12 of Akhenaten's reign, her presence in the historical record drops off dramatically. Reliefs stop mentioning her. Inscriptions shift. The once constant royal pairing begins to fragment. For someone so visually dominant, the silence is deafening. In ancient Egypt, royal events were documented carefully. Births, deaths, jubilees, building projects. Especially for figures as central as the great royal wife. If Nefertiti had died suddenly, we would expect some form of formal acknowledgement. A tomb scene, a mourning inscription, a ritual commemoration. Instead, we get ambiguity. Historians do not enjoy ambiguity, so theories began. Maybe she died during a plague that struck the royal family. Several daughters are believed to have died around this period. Disease was not uncommon. But if plague took her, why no official death record? Royal death was not a small administrative detail. It was a state event. Others suggest something more political. Perhaps she fell from favor. Perhaps internal tensions emerged within the court. Religious revolutions create enemies, and enemies sometimes wait for opportunities. But again, where is the evidence of disgrace? Erasure usually leaves marks. Scratched out names, destroyed images. With Nefertiti, it is not violent removal. It is absence. And absence in Egypt is dangerous. When a name vanishes, so does identity in the afterlife. Unless the name did not vanish. Unless it changed. That brings us back to Neferneferuaten. Around the same time Nefertiti fades from view, a ruler bearing that name appears in inscriptions. Some believe this was a separate individual, perhaps a short-lived co-regent. Others suspect something more elegant. What if Nefertiti did not disappear? What if she transformed? In ancient Egypt, identity was fluid at the highest levels of power. Pharaohs adopted throne names, divine titles, layered identities. If Nefertiti stepped into kingship, she would not remain Nefertiti the queen. She would become something else. That might explain why we cannot find her. Not because she vanished, but because we have been looking under the wrong name. If that is true, then the illusion was not her disappearance. It was our assumption that she ever truly left. Let us follow the name Neferneferuaten. It appears in inscriptions after Nefertiti fades from view, sometimes paired with epithets that translate roughly to effective for her husband or beloved of Akhenaten. Notice the word her. That is important because Egyptian names were not casual labels. They were layered statements of legitimacy. If Neferneferuaten carried feminine grammatical markers in certain inscriptions, that narrows the field. It suggests a female ruler. In that period, there are not many candidates. This is where the debate intensifies. Some scholars argue Neferneferuaten was Nefertiti ruling as co-regent or even briefly as sole pharaoh after Akhenaten's decline. Others propose she was one of their daughters. Still others introduce another shadowy figure. Smenkhare appears briefly toward the end of Akhenaten's reign, possibly as co-regent. The problem is that Smenkhare's identity is frustratingly unclear. Some think he was a male relative. Others suggest he may have been Nefertiti under a different royal persona. Here is where things get deliciously complicated. When women ruled as pharaoh in Egypt, they often adopted masculine imagery and titles. Not because they were disguising themselves in a theatrical sense, but because kingship itself was linguistically and ritually male. To rule, you fit the mold. Hatshepsut did it centuries earlier. She wore the false beard. She appeared in male regalia. Not deception. Institutional compliance. If Nefertiti became Neferneferuaten or even Smenkhare, she would have needed to navigate that same framework. Any shift in iconography might not signal replacement. It might signal adaptation. The deeper historians dig, the murkier it becomes. Inscriptions are damaged. Cartouches are incomplete. Names overlap. Titles blur. It is like trying to assemble a political thriller from half-burned documents. The key tension remains. If Nefertiti truly ruled, even briefly, then her disappearance was not disappearance at all. It was transformation. Transformation in ancient Egypt required something critical. Control of narrative. If you are rewriting religion, founding a new capital, and possibly stepping into kingship, you must also manage how history records you. Maybe she did. Maybe too well. Because 3,000 years later, we are still arguing about whether she left the stage or simply changed costumes. Whether Nefertiti ruled as Neferneferuaten or not, one thing is certain. The revolution did not last. After Akhenaten's death, the carefully constructed world of Amarna began to unravel with impressive speed. Temples to Aten fell out of favor. Priests of the old gods quietly reclaimed influence. The capital city was abandoned. Statues defaced. Names erased. Egypt had tried something radical, and Egypt decided it preferred the classics. Enter Tutankhamun, later known as Tutankhamun. The boy king ascended the throne young, and almost immediately his name changed from honoring Aten to honoring Ammonius. That is not subtle. That is a theological U-turn. Under Tutankhamun, traditional religion was restored. The old gods were welcomed back like they had just been on vacation rather than aggressively sidelined. This is where things get uncomfortable for Nefertiti. If she had been deeply tied to Aten's revolution as queen, co-regent, or even king, then the restoration of the old order would not favor her legacy. History in ancient Egypt was not neutral. It was curated. Akhenaten's name was later chiseled out of monuments. His reign treated as an aberration. Amarna dismantled. His religious experiment reframed as heresy. If Nefertiti ruled in that unstable transition period, her memory could have been politically inconvenient. Not hated, not cursed. Just inconvenient. When something is inconvenient in a system built on stone inscriptions, you do not debate it. You erase it. That might explain the strange silence. No triumphant end. No preserved tomb inscription declaring her divine ascent. Instead, we get fractured references, partial names, ambiguous cartouches. The dream of Aten, the shining sun over a newly built city, collapsed quickly. Anyone too closely associated with that dream risked being absorbed into its failure. If Nefertiti had positioned herself at the center of that revolution, then when the revolution failed, her identity may have gone down with it. Not because she lacked power, but because power shifted. When power shifts in ancient Egypt, history shifts with it. That leaves us with a haunting possibility. Maybe Nefertiti did not fool the world. Maybe the world that followed her simply chose not to remember her clearly. Let us bring in the golden boy, Tutankhamun. The most famous pharaoh in the world. Not because of what he accomplished, but because his tomb was discovered mostly intact. Gold mask, glittering treasures, international headlines. Here is the inconvenient detail. Tutankhamun's family tree is complicated. DNA studies suggest he was the son of Akhenaten. His mother, however, appears to have been one of Akhenaten's sisters, not Nefertiti. That raises a few eyebrows. If Nefertiti was not his biological mother, what was her role during his rise to power? Stepmother? Political guardian? Rival? If she did briefly rule under another name before Tutankhamun, that makes the timeline even more delicate. After Akhenaten's death, Egypt entered a short and unstable transition period. There may have been co-regents. There may have been overlapping rulers. Names appear and disappear frustratingly quickly. Then suddenly Tutankhamun becomes Tutankhamun. Religion restored. Capital moved back. Old gods reinstated. That suggests whoever held power between Akhenaten and Tutankhamun did not maintain control for long. If Nefertiti ruled during that in-between period, she would have been standing at the edge of a collapsing ideological structure. If she opposed the restoration of the old gods, or even simply symbolized the Aten revolution, she would not fit neatly into the new narrative. That creates a delicate political problem. How do you legitimize a young king restoring tradition if the previous ruler represented radical change? You minimize the transition. You simplify the story. You smooth the timeline. Sometimes you leave certain names out of the summary. Tutankhamun's reign focused on stability, repairing temples, reassuring the priesthood, calming a shaken religious system. That kind of reset does not benefit from highlighting a powerful queen who may have briefly ruled under a controversial theology. Whether she died, ruled, or negotiated quietly behind palace walls, by the time Tutankhamun's golden mask was buried beneath the Valley of the Kings, Nefertiti's story was already fading. Not erased completely. Just blurred. Sometimes blurring is more effective than destruction. Destruction leaves scars. Blur leaves mystery. And mystery lasts much longer. Here is where the mystery shifts from politics to archaeology. We still have not definitively found Nefertiti's tomb. Let that sink in. One of the most visible women in ancient Egyptian art. Possibly a co-regent. Possibly a pharaoh. The central figure in a religious revolution. And we do not know where she is buried. For ancient Egypt, that is strange. Royal burials were monumental undertakings. Carefully planned. Elaborately decorated. Documented. Even when later rulers tried to erase predecessors, tombs usually left traces. But Nefertiti, nothing confirmed. That has launched decades of speculation. Some researchers suggest she may have been buried in Amarna, the revolutionary capital. Others argue her remains could be hidden in the Valley of the Kings. There was even a theory popular a few years ago that a hidden chamber behind Tutankhamun's tomb walls might contain her burial. Imagine that twist. The Golden Boy's tomb hiding the revolutionary queen. Ground-penetrating radar scans were conducted. Headlines exploded. For a moment, it felt like the mystery was about to crack open. But the evidence was inconclusive again. That leaves us with an unsettling possibility. If Nefertiti ruled under another name, especially briefly, her burial might not be labeled Nefertiti at all. It could be inscribed under Neferneferuaten or another throne name entirely. If her political legacy became inconvenient during the restoration of traditional religion, her tomb could have been repurposed, damaged, or quietly obscured. Ancient Egyptian history is full of reused monuments, erased cartouches, overwritten names. Stone was permanent. Names were not. There is also a more dramatic possibility. What if her burial was never completed properly? If political transition happened rapidly, ritual continuity might have been disrupted. Or perhaps her tomb exists undiscovered somewhere beneath desert sands, waiting for the right excavation. For a queen whose face became one of the most recognized in the world, it is almost poetic. We know her features. We debate her power. We argue over her identity. But we do not know where she rests. That absence keeps the mystery alive. As long as her tomb remains hidden, the final chapter of Nefertiti's story remains unwritten. If Nefertiti did transition into another identity, whether as Neferneferuaten, Smenkhare, or something still debated, then we are not just dealing with a disappearance. We are dealing with reinvention. Ancient Egypt was surprisingly good at that. Pharaohs did not just have one name. They had several. Birth names, throne names, divine epithets. Each shift in power came with a shift in identity. A rebranding exercise carved into stone. If Nefertiti stepped into kingship, she would not announce it like a modern press release. She would alter titles, adjust imagery, adopt the correct regalia. Kingship was not personal. It was institutional. Institutions demand uniformity. If you were going to rule Egypt, you needed to fit the mold of Pharaoh. That meant specific iconography, specific rituals, specific language. If that required adjusting how you were portrayed, so be it. Hatshepsut had done it before. She ruled as pharaoh centuries earlier and adopted male regalia, including the ceremonial beard. Not because she was hiding her identity, but because the office of king came with visual expectations. It was not deception. It was compliance with tradition. If Nefertiti assumed power under a different name, any shift in appearance might not signal replacement. It might signal transformation. The fooled the world idea becomes interesting here. We tend to look for clear lines in history. Clear successions. Clear deaths. Clear rulers. But ancient politics was often layered. Co-regencies overlapped. Names evolved. Titles shifted. If Nefertiti ruled briefly under another identity, she may have successfully navigated a system designed to limit female authority. Not by confronting it directly, but by adapting within it. That is a different kind of power. Subtle. Strategic. Less dramatic. More effective. If she did this during a period of religious instability and political tension, then her ability to maintain control, even briefly, would have required careful image management. That brings us back to that face. Calm, controlled, almost unreadable. If she mastered visual identity in life, it would not be surprising if she mastered it in death. Maybe she did not fool the world. Maybe she simply understood it well enough to survive inside it, at least for a while. Survival in ancient Egypt was often the most difficult victory of all. If Nefertiti did hold real power, whether openly or under a throne name, then her fading from history may not be accidental. It may be strategic. Ancient Egypt did not treat history like a neutral archive. It treated it like a curated exhibition. When rulers fell out of favor, their names were chiseled out of monuments. Their statues smashed. Their contributions reassigned. Erasure was not emotional. It was administrative. Akhenaten is the clearest example. After his death, later rulers dismantled his religious revolution. His name was omitted from king lists. His monuments were dismantled and reused as building material. Imagine rewriting history by recycling it. If Nefertiti was deeply intertwined with that revolution, then preserving her memory would preserve the revolution itself. That was inconvenient. When Tutankhamun restored traditional religion, stability required a clean narrative. Egypt had briefly experimented with Aten worship, but now the old gods were back. Order was restored. Balance returned. Highlighting a powerful queen who may have ruled during that unstable transition would complicate the message. What do? You minimize. You simplify. You let ambiguity do the work. Instead of publicly condemning her, which would draw attention, you allow her identity to blur. Cartouches damaged. Names partially preserved. Titles fragmented. Not enough to destroy her completely. Just enough to make certainty impossible. Uncertainty is powerful. Without clear evidence, historians debate instead of conclude. It is subtle but effective. There is also a practical angle. If her reign was short, transitional, or politically fragile, it may not have left monumental building projects to anchor her legacy. No massive temple complex. No colossal statues bearing her throne name. Without monuments, memory weakens. Ancient Egypt remembered through stone. If stone did not fully record you, you faded. That leaves us with an uncomfortable thought. Perhaps Nefertiti did not vanish through mystery or tragedy. Perhaps she was gently edited out of the narrative because her story no longer fit the restored order. If that is true, then the greatest illusion was not hers. It was the illusion that history is objective. History, especially in ancient Egypt, belonged to whoever held the chisel last. Let us be honest. If Nefertiti did not have that bust, we might not be having this conversation. Her face became the gateway drug to her story. When the bust was unveiled in Berlin, it was not just archaeologists who were impressed. The public was captivated. Newspapers called her the most beautiful woman of antiquity. She became a cultural icon almost immediately. That might be the most ironic part of all. Beauty is distracting. We focus on the symmetry, the elegance, the aesthetics. We turn her into a symbol of timeless attractiveness. Meanwhile, her political influence, her possible co-regency, her involvement in a radical religious overhaul become footnotes beneath cheekbones. It is almost unfair. If a male ruler had engineered a theological revolution and possibly seized kingship during a volatile transition, we would frame him as cunning, strategic, ambitious. With Nefertiti, the narrative often begins with her appearance. She becomes the beautiful queen first, the revolutionary second. That framing shapes perception. It softens her. It makes her safe. But the evidence from Amarna suggests she was anything but passive. She appears in authoritative poses. She participates in state rituals. She mirrors the king in scale and posture. That is not ornamental power. That is functional influence. Yet modern memory reduces her to aesthetic perfection. That unintentionally may mirror what happened in antiquity. If later rulers wanted to neutralize her political legacy without fully attacking it, allowing her to drift into symbolism would work perfectly. She becomes an image, an icon, a face. Once someone is reduced to image, their agency becomes negotiable. It is possible Nefertiti did not fool the world through deception. It is possible the world fooled itself. We saw the face and assumed we understood the person. We admired the art and overlooked the strategy. That may be the most enduring illusion of all. When we think of Nefertiti, we do not first imagine a political operator navigating one of Egypt's most unstable periods. We imagine elegance. Perhaps that elegance concealed far more power than we are comfortable admitting. By the time Tutankhamun's golden mask was lifted from the sands, the world had a new obsession. Gold, treasure, drama. A teenage king wrapped in layers of immortality. Just like that, Nefertiti, the woman who helped reshape an entire religious system, was overshadowed by a child whose greatest achievement was dying with excellent interior decoration. History can be cruel like that. Tutankhamun's tomb was discovered almost intact. That kind of archaeological jackpot does not just rewrite textbooks. It rewires public imagination. Suddenly, the narrative of late 18th dynasty Egypt became centered on the glittering boy king. Nefertiti, whose tomb remains undiscovered and whose reign is debated, faded into background mystery. But here is the thing. Tutankhamun inherited a kingdom in chaos. The religious revolution had fractured traditional power structures. The capital had been relocated. The priesthood had been alienated. The political climate was unstable. Someone had to navigate that. If Nefertiti lived into that transitional period, whether as co-regent, rival, advisor, or even briefly as king, she would have been operating in one of the most delicate moments in Egyptian history. Delicate moments rarely produce monuments. They produce survival strategies. Tutankhamun's reign restored balance by re-embracing traditional gods. That was politically brilliant. It stabilized the priesthood. It calmed the populace. It repaired diplomatic relationships. But restoring order also required simplifying the story. The Aten experiment became a footnote. Akhenaten's radicalism softened. The transition period blurred. Nefertiti's potential authority during that blur became harder to trace. Not because she lacked significance, but because significance that complicates stability tends to be smoothed over. The boy king became the headline. The golden mask became the symbol. And Nefertiti, The woman who may have co-authored the revolution and possibly navigated its collapse, became a question mark. History often rewards spectacle over subtlety. Tutankhamun had spectacle. Nefertiti had subtlety. Subtle power leaves fewer shiny artifacts. Perhaps that is fitting. If she truly mastered image, narrative, and reinvention, then fading into ambiguity might not be a failure. It might be the final, most elegant move of all. After everything, the revolution, the co-regency debates, the name changes, the vanishing act, the missing tomb, we are left with the original question. Did Nefertiti fool the world? Maybe. But not in the way you think. There is no evidence she staged an elaborate deception or orchestrated some grand theatrical disguise. Ancient Egypt was not a palace soap opera, at least not entirely. What she may have done, however, is far more impressive. She navigated one of the most unstable periods in Egyptian history with remarkable visibility and adaptability. She stood beside a king who dismantled centuries of religious tradition. She appeared in roles traditionally reserved for male rulers. She possibly stepped into kingship during a fragile transition. When the system shifted again, her identity dissolved into ambiguity rather than outright condemnation. That is not accidental incompetence. That is political survival. If she ruled briefly under another name, she understood that authority required transformation. If she faded deliberately during the restoration of traditional religion, she understood that sometimes the smartest move is retreat. If later rulers softened or blurred her memory, that suggests she mattered enough to manage carefully. The irony is this. We remember her because of a face. But that face may be the least important thing about her. The bust gave her immortality. Her political maneuvering gave her mystery. Mystery is powerful because certainty closes conversations. Ambiguity keeps them alive for 3,000 years. Maybe she did not fool the world. Maybe she allowed the world to see exactly what it wanted. Beauty, elegance, serenity. While operating within the very real, very sharp edges of ancient power politics. Or maybe history simply fractured around her, leaving us with pieces that refuse to assemble cleanly. Either way, here we are. Still debating. Still searching for her tomb. Still wondering whether she ruled, vanished, or transformed. Perhaps that is the true legacy of Nefertiti. Not a final answer, but a question that refuses to disappear. The caravan wakes before the sun does. There is no gentle alarm clock here. Only the low, irritated groan of camels and the quiet curses of men who slept on sand that still remembers yesterday's heat and last night's cold. The sky is a deep blue bruise. Stars fading one by one as if retreating from responsibility. You sit up, brush dust from your cloak, and immediately taste grit between your teeth. Welcome to another glorious day on the Silk Road. Around you, movement begins in layers. A handler checks the camel's padded saddles, tightening leather straps with practiced hands. Each animal kneels reluctantly as bundles are hoisted onto its back. Bolts of silk wrapped in waxed cloth to protect them from sand. Sacks of pepper and cinnamon worth more than some villages. Delicate Persian glass cushioned in straw. Small locked chests containing jade carved so finely it looks like frozen water. Nothing here is random. Weight is balanced with obsessive care. Too much on one side and the camel will lurch for miles like a drunk nobleman at a feast. Too little and you waste precious space. Every knot matters. Every strap is inspected twice. A single failure in the desert is not an inconvenience. It is an obituary. You walk past the line of animals, counting them quietly. 32 camels. 12 men. 2 hired guards who look as if they trust no one, including each other. At the center stands the caravan master, already awake, already calculating. He does not shout. He does not need to. A glance from him carries more authority than any blade. The horizon begins to glow faintly. Soon the sun will rise and turn this frozen landscape into an oven. Travel must begin now, while the air is still merciful. Water skins are checked. Turbans are adjusted. Daggers are secured at the waist. Not because you plan to use them, but because you would be foolish not to. You look east for a moment, toward lands already behind you. Then west, toward months of uncertainty. The Silk Road is not a road. It is a gamble stretched across continents. As the first light spills over the dunes, you realize something simple and terrifying. You are already all in. By the time the sun fully rises, mercy is already gone. The desert does not gradually warm. It transforms. One moment the air is sharp and cold. The next it presses against your skin like a furnace door left open. Light floods the dunes, flattening shadows and blinding the careless. You wrap your cloth tighter around your head, leaving only your eyes exposed. Even the camels seem to sigh as the caravan begins to move. The rhythm sets in quickly. Step, sway, step, sway. 32 camels walk in a loose line, their padded feet sinking softly into the sand. Bells tied to a few harnesses ring faintly. Not for decoration, but to keep the line together in poor visibility. The sound becomes hypnotic. A metallic heartbeat against the silence of the desert. You walk beside the third camel, close enough to monitor its load. Silk must not shift. Glass must not crack. Pepper must remain dry. Every item on these animals has traveled thousands of miles already, passing through hands that spoke different languages and prayed to different gods. Now they are in your care, and the desert has no sympathy for carelessness. Conversation is sparse. Talking wastes moisture. Instead, you observe. The horizon never seems closer. Dunes rise and fall like frozen waves. Occasionally you spot what looks like water shimmering in the distance. A lake, a line of trees, relief. But it is always a mirage. The older traders do not even look up anymore. Hope is expensive out here. Around midday, the heat becomes personal. It presses into your skull. Sweat evaporates before it can cool you. Your tongue sticks slightly to the roof of your mouth. Water is rationed carefully. A small sip. Not enough to satisfy, only enough to continue. One of the younger men stumbles. The caravan does not stop immediately. Stopping costs time, and time costs water. Eventually the master raises his hand. A brief pause. The man is helped up, his pride bruised more than his body. He nods silently. No one mocks him. Tomorrow it could be you. The desert is not loud, but it is relentless. As the caravan keeps moving, you understand something else. Out here, survival is not dramatic. It is repetitive. It is patient. It is earned one step at a time. By late afternoon, the silence begins to change. Not in sound, in feeling. The desert still stretches endlessly. Dunes rising and collapsing into one another like sleeping giants. The wind still moves in low sighs across the sand. The camels still sway in that steady, almost arrogant rhythm. But beneath the surface, tension tightens like a drawn bowstring. You notice the guards first. They begin walking slightly farther from the main line, scanning ridges and distant rock outcroppings. One keeps his hand resting casually near the hilt of his curved blade. Casually, but not lazily. The other narrows his eyes at every shifting shadow. Bandits prefer patience. They wait for fatigue. They wait for complacency. The Silk Road does not just carry silk. It carries rumor. 2 nights ago at the last oasis, another caravan arrived half its original size. Ambushed near a dry ravine. Survivors spoke of riders appearing at dusk. Faces wrapped. Horses lean and fast. They did not kill everyone. That would be inefficient. They took the most valuable goods and left the rest to crawl toward the next water source with whatever dignity remained. You try not to imagine it. Instead, you focus on small details. The way the sand crunches faintly under leather sandals. The way the sun begins its slow descent, turning the sky from white-hot glare to muted gold. The way heat gives way slightly to something almost breathable. The caravan master calls for a brief halt at the top of a low ridge. From here you can see miles in every direction. Empty, beautiful, deceptive. He speaks quietly, but everyone listens. No fires tonight until walls surround you. No loud talk after dusk. Weapons within reach at all times. He does not dramatize the threat. He simply acknowledges it. Fear is useful, but panic is fatal. As the march resumes, your senses sharpen. Every dark speck on the horizon could be a rock. Or it could be men watching, calculating the weight of your cargo against the effort of taking it. The bells on the camels continue their soft ringing. Peaceful, almost innocent. But as the sun dips lower and long shadows stretch across the sand, you realize something unsettling. Out here, danger does not announce itself. It studies you first. Just as the sun begins to sink into a haze of copper and dust, you see it. At first, it looks like a mirage again. A low rectangle interrupting the horizon. But this time, it does not shimmer. It grows larger. Walls. Solid, square, unapologetic. A caravanserai. Relief spreads quietly through the line. No cheers, no foolish displays of emotion. Just a subtle loosening in shoulders, a slight increase in pace. Even the camels seem to sense the promise of rest. The structure rises from the desert like a fortress built by patience. Thick mud brick walls, high and nearly windowless. Designed to keep out wind, sand, and men with bad intentions. A single heavy wooden gate stands open. Guarded by two men who look bored but alert. The most dangerous combination. As you pass through the gate, the noise changes instantly. The desert's vast silence is replaced by contained life. Hooves clatter against packed earth. Traders speak in half a dozen languages. Someone laughs too loudly. The air smells of sweat, animals, spices, and smoke. Inside the courtyard, the camels kneel one by one. Loads are inspected carefully before being removed. You run your hands over the silk bundles, checking for tears. The glass crates are intact. The jade chests remain locked. For today, fortune has allowed you to keep what is yours. Along the inner walls are small rooms for merchants. Not luxurious, but solid. A roof, a door, protection. In the center, a shallow well and troughs for animals. A stable boy moves quickly, collecting coins before offering water. You finally remove your head covering. Sand falls from your hair. Your skin feels tight from salt and heat. Someone hands you a small bowl of lentil stew and flatbread. It tastes better than any feast because you are still alive to eat it. Oil lamps begin to glow as darkness settles. Conversations grow softer, more conspiratorial. Deals are whispered. Prices negotiated in careful tones. News exchanged like currency. Which routes are safe? Which rulers demand higher tolls? Which regions are unstable this season? You sit against the cool inner wall, watching shadows flicker. Outside these walls, the desert waits without emotion. But tonight, you have stone between you and it. For a caravan on the Silk Road, that is luxury beyond silk. Night inside the caravanserai does not mean rest. It means business. The courtyard that felt chaotic at dusk now settles into pockets of controlled activity. Oil lamps hang from hooks along the walls, their flames trembling in the warm night air. Shadows stretch and overlap, distorting faces, softening intentions. Under this kind of light, everyone looks slightly mysterious, slightly untrustworthy. Which, frankly, is accurate. You sit cross-legged on a woven mat with 3 other traders. Between you lies a small wooden chest. It contains nothing dramatic, just silk. But not ordinary silk. This bolt is dyed a deep, almost impossible shade of blue. Achieved with pigments that require time, skill, and access to resources most men will never see. The buyer runs his fingers over the fabric slowly. He does not compliment it. He does not frown. He simply measures his reaction carefully. The performance has begun. You name a price. He exhales softly as if you have insulted his ancestors. He counters with a number that would be amusing if it were not meant to be serious. Back and forth you go, voices low, expressions controlled. The goal is not to win dramatically. The goal is to leave both parties believing they have been clever. Around you, similar scenes unfold. A Persian trader offers glass bowls so thin they almost sing when tapped lightly. A man from farther west unwraps small bricks of fragrant resin used in temples. Another displays spices in tiny piles, their scent cutting through the stable smell of animals. Whispers carry information beyond goods. Rumors of rising taxes in one city. Bandits spotted along a northern pass. A new governor who favors certain merchants over others. On the Silk Road, knowledge travels faster than camels. You keep one ear open to everything. Near the gate, the guards remain posted. Even here, within walls, trust is limited. Coins change hands quickly. Goods are never left unattended. A man who smiles too easily is watched twice as carefully. Eventually, hands are shaken. The blue silk changes ownership. Silver coins slide into your pouch with a weight that feels reassuring. But you know better than to relax. Tonight you made a profit. Tomorrow you will carry that profit back into a desert that does not care how clever you were under lamplight. After the deals are struck and the coins counted, the caravan's mood shifts again. Business fades. Humanity remains. You sit near a low fire in the center of the courtyard, its flames carefully contained in a shallow pit. Sparks rise briefly before vanishing into the night. Around you gather men from lands so distant that their childhoods unfolded under completely different constellations. A trader from the east begins to speak first. He tells of mountains so high that breathing becomes a negotiation. Of narrow passes where caravans move single file. One misstep separating life from legend. He laughs lightly as he describes losing half a shipment of porcelain to a landslide. The mountain wanted plates, he says with a shrug. Another man, darker skinned and soft-spoken, speaks of monsoon rains that swallow roads whole. Of jungles that hum with insects so loud they sound like machinery. His spices, he explains, were once green and alive before being dried and packed for this endless migration across continents. You listen, aware that these stories are more than entertainment. They are maps disguised as memory. Every anecdote carries warning. Every joke hides instruction. The guards sit slightly apart, cleaning blades by lamplight. One occasionally glances toward the gate. Trust the walls, but verify them. Someone passes around a small cup of fermented drink. It burns going down. You accept only a sip. Intoxication is a luxury for people not crossing deserts. Above you, the sky is clear and enormous. Stars stretch from horizon to horizon, indifferent and ancient. You recognize a few constellations. Others are unfamiliar, named differently by different tongues. Even the sky, it seems, has multiple versions depending on who is telling the story. Laughter breaks out suddenly from one corner of the courtyard. A man imitates the exaggerated bargaining style of a rival merchant, complete with dramatic sighs and wounded pride. For a moment, the Silk Road feels almost light-hearted. But the fire burns low. Eventually, conversations thin out. One by one, men drift toward their small rooms or sleeping mats beside their goods. You lie back, cloak wrapped tightly around you. Tomorrow the walls disappear again. Stories will once more give way to survival. Morning departure is smooth. Too smooth. The gate creaks open at first light. Camels are loaded with the same careful precision. Silver coins are redistributed discreetly across belts and hidden pockets. The courtyard empties, and once again, the desert welcomes you back with blank indifference. For the first few hours, the march feels routine. The sky is pale and wide. The wind is steady but harmless. You almost begin to believe the day will pass without incident. Then you notice the horizon. A faint line. Darker than the sky. Thicker than cloud. One of the older handlers stops walking. He narrows his eyes, squinting into the distance. He does not need to announce it. The caravan master sees it too. Sandstorm. Orders come quickly and without drama. Camels are brought closer together. Faces are wrapped tightly with cloth. Loose fabric is secured. Delicate goods are reinforced with extra bindings. No one wastes breath on complaint. The line on the horizon grows taller, wider. It moves with unsettling speed. Within minutes, the wind shifts from steady to aggressive. It pushes at your back first, then circles unpredictably. The air thickens. The sky begins to disappear behind a moving wall of dust. Down! Someone shouts. The camels kneel, trained for this moment. You drop beside one, pressing yourself against its broad body for partial shelter. The first blast hits like a physical force. Sand strikes your face, your hands, any exposed skin. It stings. It invades. The world becomes noise. Wind roars in your ears. Grains of sand whip against leather and cloth like endless tiny projectiles. Visibility shrinks to almost nothing. You can barely see the camel beside you, let alone the rest of the caravan. Breathing becomes deliberate through cloth. Slow, controlled. Panic wastes oxygen and focus. Time stretches strangely inside the storm. Minutes feel like hours. The desert is no longer empty and distant. It is inside your eyes, your mouth, your thoughts. You cling to the rope tethering the camels together. Let go, and you could wander 10 steps and vanish completely. Eventually, gradually, the roar softens. The wall moves on. When the air clears enough to see, the landscape is altered. Dunes reshaped. Tracks erased. The path forward uncertain. As you stand brushing sand from your cloak, you understand a brutal truth. Out here, even the ground beneath you refuses to stay the same. When the last gust finally loosens its grip, silence returns in fragments. At first, it is only the absence of roaring wind. Then you hear the camels shifting, shaking sand from their long lashes. A man coughing. Another muttering something between prayer and complaint. The world feels stunned, as if the desert itself is catching its breath. You stand slowly. The caravan no longer looks like a line. It looks like survivors. Sand has buried half the packs. Fine dust coats every surface. Cloth, skin, rope, even the metal buckles dulled to the color of ash. You run your hands over the nearest bundle of silk. The outer wrapping is abrasive with grit, but intact. You exhale, not dramatically, just enough to acknowledge that fortune has not abandoned you entirely. Count, the caravan master says. Not loudly. Calmly. You count camels first. One by one, brushing sand from their faces, checking straps. 32 becomes 31. A pause. Voices call out across the uneven dunes. A handler climbs a newly formed ridge and scans the area. After a tense minute that feels much longer, a shape moves in the distance. A camel, partially buried, struggling to rise. 2 men rush toward it, pulling at its harness, coaxing it upright. 32 again. Next, the men. 12. All present. One with a bloodied lip from being struck by flying debris. Another with raw skin where cloth shifted in the wind. Nothing fatal. The desert showed its strength, but not its cruelty. Not today. The greater problem is less visible. The storm has erased the road. Tracks that once pointed west are gone, swallowed under newly shaped dunes. Landmarks have shifted. A familiar ridge now appears unfamiliar. In a landscape already ambiguous, certainty has been sanded away. The master studies the sun's position. Another trader consults a small wooden board etched with stars and directional notes. Navigation returns to older methods now. Sky, memory, instinct. You drink a measured sip of water. It tastes faintly of leather and dust. It is perfect. The caravan reforms slowly, deliberately. No one speaks of fear. But as you begin walking again, stepping onto ground that did not exist yesterday, you understand something deeper. The Silk Road does not promise safety. It promises endurance. Endurance out here is everything. Days pass after the storm, blending into one another like layers of wind-shaped sand. You no longer measure time by sunrise and sunset alone. You measure it by aches, by the slow thinning of water skins, by the subtle shift in conversation from confident plans to quiet calculations. Distance is not dramatic. It is cumulative. The camels move with steady resignation, but even they begin to show strain. One limps slightly, its padded foot irritated by a stone hidden beneath soft sand. Another refuses water for a moment, turning its head stubbornly before finally drinking. You watch them closely. A camel lost is not merely inconvenience. It is weight redistributed onto others. It is margin shrinking. The men feel it too. Tempers shorten. Jokes grow rarer. Silence stretches longer between exchanges. You notice how often hands drift toward belts where coins are hidden, as if checking to ensure the entire journey still has purpose. Wealth means nothing if you do not survive to spend it. At midday, the heat returns with ruthless familiarity. The horizon trembles with mirages again, but this time no one even glances at them. Hope is rationed like water now. That afternoon, a new tension emerges. In the distance, faint but unmistakable, you see movement parallel to your path. Not close, not threatening. Just there. A small group of riders silhouetted against the dunes, keeping pace. The guards notice immediately. No panic, no sudden change in direction. That would signal weakness. Instead, the caravan tightens formation slightly. The bells on the camels are muffled. Weapons remain visible but not drawn. The riders do not approach. They watch. Hours pass like this. 2 lines moving through the same ocean of sand, separated by space and intention. You cannot tell whether they are bandits weighing risk, rival traders assessing opportunity, or nomads simply curious. Eventually, as the sun dips lower, the riders veer away. They dissolve into the dunes as quietly as they appeared. Relief does not come loudly. It comes as a subtle release in your shoulders. The caravan continues west, and as you walk, tired but unbroken, you realize that the Silk Road is not defined by its grand exchanges of silk and jade. It is defined by the quiet decision made again and again to keep moving. 4 days after the storm, the landscape begins to change. Subtly at first. The sand grows harder beneath your feet. Patches of scrub appear, then small twisted trees that look like they have given up on ever being lush. The air carries a different weight now. Less dry. Less aggressive. You do not trust it at first. The desert has taught you suspicion. Then you see it. Not a mirage this time. Walls rising from the earth. Towers catching the last light. A city. Real and solid and waiting. Samarkand. The name alone carries weight across continents. For weeks you have heard traders speak it with a particular reverence, as if the city were less a place and more an idea. Silk from the east gathers here before continuing west. Spices from the south find buyers in its markets. Glass from distant workshops breaks and reforms into new shapes under the hands of local artisans. The city does not just trade goods. It transforms them. You approach the gates as evening settles. The walls are ancient and massive, built from bricks the color of dried blood. Guards watch your caravan approach with practiced indifference. They have seen 1,000 caravans. They will see 1,000 more. Questions are minimal. A small toll is paid. The gates open. Inside, Samarkand unfolds like a story you have heard but never fully believed. The streets are crowded even at dusk. Merchants call out in languages you only half recognize. Children weave between camels and carts with the confidence of those born among chaos. The smell of grilled meat mixes with incense and the ever-present dust of the steppe. You breathe it in and feel, for the first time in weeks, something close to safety. The caravan master negotiates space in a large caravanserai near the central market. Rooms are found. Loads are checked and rechecked. Camels are finally relieved of their burdens and led to proper stables where water flows freely and hay is actually hay, not the dry scrub they have survived on for days. You sit in the courtyard as night fully claims the city. Around you, the sounds of Samarkand continue. Music from somewhere. Laughter. The clink of coins. The murmur of a dozen languages weaving together into something that feels almost like a single voice. You close your eyes and let the noise wash over you. Tomorrow there will be business. More bargaining. More careful negotiations. More weighing of silk against silver and silver against survival. But tonight, there is only this. Walls that have stood for centuries. A city that has welcomed strangers since before your grandfather's grandfather was born. And the quiet satisfaction of having crossed another piece of the world and lived to tell about it. Morning in Samarkand arrives not with silence but with acceleration. The city does not wake gradually. It explodes into activity. Shutters bang open. Merchants begin arranging their goods before the sun fully clears the walls. Donkeys bray. Metalworkers start their hammering. The smell of fresh bread floods the streets. You make your way to the main market, the famous bazaar where caravans from every direction converge. It is overwhelming at first. Stalls stretch in every direction, seemingly endless. Silk from China hangs beside wool from the steppes. Spices from India fill the air with competing aromas. Jewelry glitters under makeshift awnings. Slaves, both a blessing and a curse of these lands, stand in chains near one corner. You look away. The bargaining begins immediately. A merchant from Baghdad examines your blue silk with the same careful attention as the buyer at the caravanserai nights ago. He asks questions about its origins, its quality, the route you traveled. You answer some questions truthfully, others less so. This is expected. This is the dance. Hours pass. Deals are struck. Silver changes hands. Some goods continue west with other traders. Others find homes here in Samarkand, destined to become robes for wealthy merchants or wedding gifts for their daughters. You watch your silk disappear into the labyrinth of the bazaar and feel a strange mix of loss and satisfaction. The journey is not over, but this chapter is. Morning in Samarkand arrives not with silence but with acceleration. The city does not wake gradually. It explodes into activity. Shutters bang open. Merchants begin arranging their goods before the sun fully clears the walls. Donkeys bray. Metalworkers start their hammering. The smell of fresh bread floods the streets. You make your way to the main market, the famous bazaar where caravans from every direction converge. It is overwhelming at first. Stalls stretch in every direction, seemingly endless. Silk from China hangs beside wool from the steppes. Spices from India fill the air with competing aromas. Jewelry glitters under makeshift awnings. Slaves, both a blessing and a curse of these lands, stand in chains near one corner. You look away. The bargaining begins immediately. A merchant from Baghdad examines your blue silk with the same careful attention as the buyer at the caravanserai nights ago. He asks questions about its origins, its quality, the route you traveled. You answer some questions truthfully, others less so. This is expected. This is the dance. Hours pass. Deals are struck. Silver changes hands. Some goods continue west with other traders. Others find homes here in Samarkand, destined to become robes for wealthy merchants or wedding gifts for their daughters. You watch your silk disappear into the labyrinth of the bazaar and feel a strange mix of loss and satisfaction. The journey is not over, but this chapter is. In the afternoon, you explore. The city reveals itself slowly. Mosques with tiles so blue they seem to hold pieces of the sky. Madrasas where scholars debate texts older than any building here. A central square so vast it could hold your entire hometown with room to spare. You feel small in the best possible way. Insignificant, but part of something larger. Word reaches you that another caravan is forming. Destination, Baghdad. Then perhaps Damascus. Then perhaps the Mediterranean coast where ships wait to carry goods to places with names you cannot pronounce. The leader is looking for experienced travelers. You have proven yourself on the road. You survived the storm. You navigated the tension of the riders. You kept your goods safe. You are no longer a novice. That night, you sit with the other survivors of your original caravan. The men who started this journey with you weeks ago. You share a meal. You share stories. You share the particular bond that forms between people who have faced death together and walked away. Some will stay in Samarkand. Others will return east. A few, like you, will continue west. The caravan master from your original journey approaches. He does not say much. He never does. But he places a hand on your shoulder and nods. It is enough. Approval from a man who has crossed these roads for 30 years. You will carry that nod with you into the next desert, the next city, the next unknown. Leaving Samarkand proves harder than leaving the last oasis. The city has worked its way into you. The warmth of its people. The chaos of its markets. The certainty of its walls. You find yourself delaying one more day, then another. There is always one more negotiation, one more story to hear, one more corner of the bazaar unexplored. But the caravan master of your new group is less patient than the last. He sends word. Tomorrow at dawn. Be ready or be left. You spend your final evening walking the streets alone. The city at dusk is different than at noon. Softer. More reflective. Lovers whisper in shadowed corners. Old men sip tea outside shops they have owned for decades. A musician plays somewhere, the melody drifting through alleys like smoke. You think about home. Not with the sharp pain of those first weeks on the road, but with a quieter ache. You wonder if your family remembers your face. If the woman you left behind still waits. If the children you helped raise have grown. The road has changed you. You feel it in your bones, in the way you watch strangers now, in the patience that has settled into your movements. Morning comes too quickly. The new caravan is larger than the last. 60 camels. 20 men. Guards who look capable of violence without hesitation. The leader is a hawk-faced man from Aleppo who speaks 6 languages and trusts no one. He inspects your packs personally. He asks about your route, your goods, your weapons. You answer directly. He nods once. You are accepted. The gates of Samarkand open. The desert waits beyond, but differently now. This road leads through mountains. Through passes where bandits hide among rocks. Through valleys where snow falls even in summer. Through lands ruled by kings you have never heard of. You look back once. The city rises against the morning sky, blue tiles catching light, minarets reaching toward heaven. Then you turn west and do not look again. The desert ends gradually. Sand gives way to rock. Rock gives way to slope. Slope gives way to mountains so vast they seem to hold up the sky. The air thins. Breathing becomes work. The camels complain in new ways, sounds you have not heard before. The path narrows. At times you walk single file along ledges where one misstep means a fall measured in hundreds of feet. Below, rivers rage through canyons carved over millennia. Above, peaks wear snow like crowns. You understand now why traders speak of this route with reverence and fear. At night, you camp in mountain passes where the wind howls like wounded animals. Fires are small and brief. Fuel is scarce this high. You huddle together for warmth, bodies pressed against bodies, strangers sharing heat because survival demands it. Conversation stops. Only the wind speaks. The bandits everyone warned about do not appear. Perhaps the season is wrong. Perhaps the guards look too capable. Perhaps the mountains themselves protect you. You do not question fortune. You simply keep moving. After 12 days, the mountains begin to relent. The slopes soften. The air thickens. Green appears. First as scattered patches, then as rolling hills. Then as farmland. Irrigation channels. Villages. You have crossed the spine of the world and emerged on the other side. The road flattens. The climate shifts. You are in Persia now, though borders here mean less than water sources. Villages become towns. Towns become cities. Each has its own character, its own dialect, its own way of bargaining. You adapt. You learn. You survive. In Ray, you trade some of your remaining goods for information about the road ahead. In Hamadan, you rest for a week and remember what it feels like to sleep without fear. In Baghdad, you finally understand why poets weep when describing this city. Canals. Gardens. Palaces. Markets so vast you could spend a lifetime exploring them and die unsatisfied. Baghdad is not the end of your journey, but it feels like a destination. The Caliph city. The center of learning, of commerce, of power. You walk its streets in awe, a traveler from nowhere, carrying nothing but experience and a few remaining goods. Here you make your final trades. The last of the silk. A few pieces of jade you have carried since the eastern mountains. Small bags of precious spices that have survived heat, storm, and bandit territory. The Baghdad merchants are sophisticated. They have seen everything. They bargain hard but fairly. When you leave the last market, your purse is heavy with silver and gold. You have done it. You have crossed the Silk Road. From the eastern deserts to the heart of the Islamic world. Months of travel. Thousands of miles. Countless dangers. And you are alive. Success creates its own dilemma. You have wealth now. More than you started with. Enough to live comfortably in Baghdad for years. Enough to start a business. Enough to send for your family if you choose. But the road calls. You feel it in your bones, this strange addiction to movement. To waking each morning not knowing what the day will bring. To crossing passes and fording rivers and sleeping under stars that change with each degree of latitude. The men from your caravan scatter. Some stay in Baghdad. Others push toward the Mediterranean. A few speak of returning east, of repeating the journey in reverse, of becoming the very traders you once watched with awe. You sit by the Tigris River one evening, watching water flow past, and try to decide. Home is far. Home is now, a collection of memories rather than a place. The road has become your home. The caravan your family. The next horizon your destination. A trader from your original group finds you there. The one who stumbled during that first desert crossing, the one whose pride was bruised but body survived. He has decided to return east. He asks if you will join him. You look at the river. You think of the mountains, the deserts, the storms, the cities. You think of the face of that woman in Samarkand, the one who smiled at you from a balcony. You think of your mother, probably dead now, your father certainly gone, the siblings scattered like your own caravan. I will go west, you say. To the sea. To see what lies beyond. He nods. He understands. The road does not release everyone at the same point. The journey from Baghdad to the Mediterranean takes another month. Through lands that feel almost familiar now. Through cities whose names you learn and forget. Through encounters that blur into each other. And then, finally, the sea. You have heard of it your entire life. Traders spoke of it with wonder. A body of water so vast you cannot see the other side. Ships that carry goods across its surface like camels carry goods across sand. Ports where every language on earth can be heard in a single afternoon. You stand on the shore and stare. The water stretches to the horizon and beyond. Blue and endless and impossibly large. The sound of waves fills your ears. The salt air fills your lungs. You have reached the edge of the world you knew, and it is not an edge at all. It is a beginning. In the port city of Acre, you find ships bound for places with names like Constantinople, Venice, Rome. The traders here speak of Europe as you once spoke of the East. Mysterious. Dangerous. Full of opportunity for those brave enough to try. Your remaining wealth could buy passage. Could buy goods to trade. Could buy a new life on another continent. Or it could buy a return home. A boat east, then a caravan, then the long road back to faces you have not seen in more than a year. You sit in a harbor tavern, listening to sailors argue in languages you barely understand, and you make your choice. Some stories end with arrival. Some end with departure. Yours ends with neither. You book passage on a ship bound for Venice. The voyage takes weeks. Storms test you. Calms frustrate you. You learn new fears, fears of depth rather than distance, of water that offers no purchase, of creatures that live where light does not reach. Venice rises from the sea like a dream. Canals instead of streets. Boats instead of camels. A city built on water, defying everything you thought you knew about what cities require. You walk its bridges in wonder, a desert traveler in a world of water. From Venice, you travel overland. Through mountains again, but different mountains. Through forests, which you have never seen. Through lands where the people look different, speak differently, worship differently. You are the foreigner now, the stranger, the one from elsewhere. Months pass. Years perhaps. Time blurs on the road the way distance does. You trade. You learn. You survive. You become someone new while carrying the memory of who you were. And then one day, you find yourself on a road heading east. Not because you decided to return, but because the road itself turned. Because all roads, if followed long enough, eventually circle back. The mountains look smaller than you remember. The deserts less terrifying. The cities less exotic. You have seen too much now to be amazed by any single thing. But you are not disappointed. You are grateful. Grateful for the eyes that can still find beauty. Grateful for the legs that still carry you. Grateful for the road that has taught you everything. Samarkand again. Different now. Or perhaps you are different. You recognize streets, but they feel like memories rather than places. You visit the caravanserai where you first stayed. The owner is dead. His son runs it now. He does not remember you. Why would he? 1,000 travelers have passed through since. You continue east. Through the mountain passes that once terrified you. Through the desert that nearly killed you. Past the ridge where the riders watched. Past the place where the storm hit. Past the oasis where you first learned that hope must be rationed. And then, one evening, you see it. Not a city. Not a caravanserai. Just a cluster of buildings where the desert meets the mountains. Small. Unremarkable. Home. You stop walking. For the first time in years, you do not know what comes next. The road has ended. The circle is closed, they do not recognize you at first. Why would they? You left a young man. You returned someone else entirely. Gray in your beard. Scars on your arms. Eyes that have seen too much to look at anything simply. Your sister cries when she finally believes. Your brother embraces you like you might disappear. Children you left behind are grown, with children of their own. A woman you once loved is married to another. She smiles at you from across the compound and you smile back. The road taught you many things. One of them is how to let go. That night, you sit by a fire. Not a caravan fire, temporary and anxious. A home fire, permanent and warm. Around you, family. Real family. Blood and memory and shared history. They ask about your journey. You try to tell them. The words come out small. How do you describe months of silence to people who have never been alone? How do you explain the terror of a sandstorm to those who have only known gentle rain? How do you convey the beauty of Samarkand's blue tiles to those who have never left these hills? You try anyway. You talk until your voice gives out. You talk until the fire burns low. You talk until the children fall asleep in their mother's laps. When you finish, there is silence. Then your brother speaks. You have seen the world, he says. We have only seen this. Tell us, was it worth it? You look at the fire. You think of every step. Every danger. Every moment of beauty and terror and boredom and joy. You think of the faces. The traders who became brothers. The guards who saved your life. The strangers who showed you kindness for no reason. Yes, you say. It was worth it. And you mean it. You stay. Months pass. The rhythm of settled life returns slowly, like a language you once knew but have not spoken in years. You help with the animals. You tend the fields. You sit in the shade and watch clouds move across a sky that feels smaller than it once did. Sometimes at night, you wake thinking you hear camel bells. Sometimes you reach for a water skin that is exactly where you left it. Sometimes you catch yourself scanning the horizon for riders, for storms, for the next destination. But the road has released you. You are home. The circle is complete. In the spring, a caravan passes near your village. You walk out to meet it. The traders are young, eager, nervous. They remind you of yourself, years ago, before the desert taught them what they do not yet know. Where are you bound? You ask. Samarkand, one says. Then perhaps beyond. You almost smile. Beyond. Such a simple word for such a complicated thing. I crossed that road once, you say. Long ago. They look at you with new interest. An elder who has seen the world. A living map. They ask questions. You answer some. You let others remain mysteries. Some things must be learned, not told. As they prepare to leave, the youngest trader approaches you. He cannot be more than 18. His eyes are full of everything you once were. Will I make it? He asks. Will I survive? You look at him. At his fear. His hope. His certainty that the road will change him, not knowing yet that change is the entire point. Keep moving, you say. One step at a time. Do not stop. Do not give up. And when you think you cannot go on, take one more step. That step will carry you. He nods. He does not fully understand. He will. The road will teach him, as it taught you. You watch them disappear into the distance. Camels swaying. Bells ringing faintly. Dust rising behind them. Then you turn and walk back toward the village. Toward the fire. Toward the people who waited. The road continues without you now. Somewhere out there, caravans are crossing deserts, traders are bargaining in bazaars, travelers are discovering cities they will never forget. The great migration of goods and stories and human beings flows on, as it has for centuries, as it will for centuries more. You are no longer part of it. But you carry it with you. In your memory. In your bones. In the way you look at horizons and remember when every horizon was a destination. The fire crackles. Your family talks quietly. The stars emerge, one by one, the same stars that guided you across deserts and mountains and seas. They look smaller from here. Less urgent. But they are the same. You close your eyes. The road is quiet now. But in your dreams, you are still walking. Still moving. Still crossing that endless landscape where every step is a story and every story is a step towards something you cannot name but must find anyway. The Silk Road does not end. It simply becomes part of you. And you, in turn, become part of it. A thread in the vast tapestry of human movement, human connection, human survival. Small and insignificant and absolutely essential. Somewhere, a caravan wakes before dawn. Somewhere, a trader counts his remaining water. Somewhere, a young man looks toward the horizon and feels the first stirring of the fear and excitement that means the road has claimed another soul. And somewhere, an old man by a fire smiles in his sleep, still walking, still traveling, still following that endless road that leads everywhere and nowhere, that promises everything and delivers only itself. The road continues. It always continues. That is its nature. That is its gift. That is its curse. And you, traveler, are part of it now. Whether you walk or rest, whether you cross deserts or tend fields, whether you carry silk or memories, the road flows through you. It made you. It unmade you. It remade you into someone who can sit by a fire and be content, knowing that beyond the horizon, the journey never really ends. It simply changes shape. The fire burns low. Someone adds wood. Sparks rise toward stars that have guided travelers since before there were travelers. You open your eyes, just for a moment, and look at the faces around you. Faces you crossed the world to see again. You smile. They smile back. And somewhere, far away, a camel bell rings.